Section 6 of From the Latchkey of My Bookhouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Fry, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. From the Latchkey of My Bookhouse, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Clara Dottie Bates, American, 1838 through 1895. Mrs. Bates was a writer of stories and poems for children. Bennett, Henry Holcomb, American, 1863 through blank. Mr. Bennett is known chiefly for his stories of frontier army life. Bjornson, Bjornsterne, Norwegian, 1832 through 1910. In the year 1832, a small boy was born in the rugged land of Norway. As he grew older, the lad seemed a wild and unruly little fellow, and the forces at work within him as strong and untamed as the powerful sea that beat up on Norway's rock-bound coast. At school he was the despair of his tutors. Try as they would, they could never rouse in him the smallest interest in any of the regular studies. His parents even thought seriously of sending their son to sea in the hope that he might be tamed by the stern discipline of a sailor. But at last, with great difficulty, young Bjornson passed the entrance examinations for the University of Christiania, and there he suddenly found the line of activity to which he could devote all that bounding energy that had heretofore run away with him. He discovered that at this time there was no national drama in Norway. Actors on the stage were giving light French comedies, or parading through the heavy action of some German play, or producing the latest Danish novelties from Copenhagen. At this miserable state of things, young Bjornson's patriotism took flame. "Danish actors and plays must go," he cried. "Let us have a real Norwegian drama." And he set himself immediately to write Norwegian plays. But when the first fire of his patriotic wrath had cooled, he was forced to admit that at that time the Danish theater was far superior to the Norwegian, and if he really wished to do something fine for the Norwegian literature, he would have to swallow his pride and be willing to learn of Denmark. Accordingly, at the age of 24, he set out for Copenhagen, there to study patiently all there was to learn. Henceforth, the boy whom tutors had been unable to drive to work that did not interest him, labored and worked without ceasing. His Norway should have a literature. He wrote first a story called Synnøve Solbakken, which was different from anything else that had ever been done in Norway. Heretofore it had been the fashion for Norwegian authors to write romantic tales of Italy or some other far-off land, but Bjornson had the courage to seek his material right at home. He wrote about Norway and homely Norse peasant life with an utter simplicity and freshness that were all his own. Never before had Norse peasant life been so sympathetically studied and so beautifully portrayed. Bjornson's work became instantly popular. On his return from Copenhagen, Bjornson was made editor of the Norse People's Journal, but he also became director of the National Theatre in Bergen, and now, at last, he began to publish in rapid succession a series of national dramas, the subjects of which were taken from the old Norse or Icelandic sagas. As in his novels he had aimed to bring into literature the type of the modern Norse peasant, so in his dramas he strove to present what was most thoroughly Norse out of Norway's historic past. As time went on, a still more serious purpose took root in Bjornson's heart. He was no longer satisfied with mere literary beauty in his work. It was no longer his ambition only to please and amuse. He began to see clearly the faults that existed in Norwegian society, and to wish to bring home to the Norwegian people some recognition of these faults and a real desire for reform. So now he spoke out plainly and depicted these faults in his dramas. Most particularly it was the oppression, injustice, and cold conventionality of the upper classes as opposed to the modern workman's world that he so strikingly portrayed. Naturally, these plays of his cost him much of his popularity with people of quality. Many a nobleman now turned him a decided cold shoulder. Nevertheless, such work revealed in him a still higher sense of patriotism than that of his earlier days, and a truer and far more unselfish devotion to the best interests of his people. From now on Bjornson took a strong interest in the politics of his time. He proved an eloquent orator, and wielded great influence in obtaining more liberal government. He believed wholeheartedly in a republic, but was opposed to the use of violent means to establish it in Norway. In 1880 he traveled through the United States, studying how a republic really worked out in practice, and lecturing with great success to his countrymen in the West. During the later years of his life, Bjornson was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, the greatest honor which the world today can bestow upon an author. He has proved to be one of the greatest poets, dramatists, and novelists that Norway has ever known, and in addition to this, he was the most Norwegian of all Norwegian writers. William Blake, English, 1757 through 1827. William Blake was the first English poet to express in his verse the thoughts and feelings of little children. Other poets had written of grown people, but Blake, in his Songs of Innocence, saw straight into the heart of the little child, and for the first time uttered what was there in poetry. Blake was an engraver, too, and he decorated his poems with beautiful designs, which were afterwards colored by hand. As he grew older, Blake lost the joyousness with which he had written Songs of Innocence, and wrote the sad and bitter Songs of Experience. Then, alas, men said he was mad, but his Songs of Innocence remain his loveliest work. From Songs of Innocence. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life, and bade thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead? From Songs of Experience. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Brown, Abby Farwell, American, contemporary. Abby Farwell Brown was born in Boston and educated at Radcliffe College. She has traveled a great deal in Europe, is unmarried, and has contributed many short stories to magazines. The Lonesomest Doll, John of the Woods, The Flower Princess, The Christmas Angel. End of section 6.